Welcome to the Today's Leader podcast. Building tomorrow's best leaders, today.
Way to go, guys. Way to go. Keep it going. Good job, guys. All right, Paul, I see you. All right, finish. Let's go.
Great job, guys.
Hey there, it's Coach Curl here, and welcome to episode 396 of the Today's Leader podcast, leading a revolution to build tomorrow's best leaders today. Now, we provide proven expert advice and tips for leaders at all levels who are striving to get to the next level, whether it's a career leap or whether it's business growth. Now, if you are an emerging and an ambitious leader, check out the Emerging Leaders Masterclass at tomorrowsbestleaders.com. Leverage your potential and prepare yourself for the next role. Check it out today. Now, today's episode, we get some brilliant advice from an accomplished author and a high-performance leadership expert. Will Schirmer is an experienced executive and HR leader with over 22 years of experience in the field. He's worked in both the national and international companies in the USA and in Europe, and has built numerous leadership development and talent management programs for companies that he's worked for and contracted to. He's helped many people address issues of personal fulfillment, professional development, performance communication, and relationships. He's also the recent author of the Leadership Core, Competencies for Successfully Leading Others, and his new book, Fulfilled, Finding Happiness and Prosperity in Your Life. And that's been just released. Will holds an undergraduate degree in behavioural and political sciences and graduate degrees in human resource management and social sciences. It's truly an illuminating discussion, and if you truly want to take the next step in your career, this is one you do not want to miss. After a word from our sponsor, please welcome William Schirmer to the podcast.
The podcast is brought to you by Think and Grow Business, the home of the Think and Grow Business Mastermind. If you're serious about growing your business, get serious and join a mastermind group today. Find out more at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au.
My pleasure to welcome to the Today's Leader podcast, Building Tomorrow's Best Leaders Today. Please welcome Will Schirmer. How are you, Will?
Very well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today.
And I guess we're both in a really good space. This is your last task for the week. It's a Friday afternoon in Seattle, Washington. And for me, it's bright and early Saturday morning. I've got my run done. I'm sort of shirking the household duties at the moment by doing this. So I think we're both in a really good space for this particular interview. So share with the audience, Will, if you will, the Will Schirmer story.
Yes, certainly. So I've been in human resources and talent management for about 23 years, almost 24 years now. I won't say I fell into the profession, but that's not far off the truth. I remember taking an occupational survey when I was about 17 in high school, and the survey said I should be a personnel manager. And I promptly laughed and went on to electrical engineering school because my dad was an engineer, and I had an interest in math and science as well. But lo and behold, years later, of course, I did end up in the profession, and I always had an interest in the people side of the business, of course, perhaps realizing early, perhaps it was just luck, that people are the differentiator. And I enjoyed the challenge of trying to find the right people for open positions for my employers. I was in operations management before HR. And how do we engage them? How do we properly onboard and manage their performance? How do we make sure that people are retained and we keep their expertise in-house? So a lot of those sorts of interests led me to an opportunity first to work on board a consulting firm whose expertise was in the recruiting, training, and retention consultancy out of the UK. I lived and worked in the UK for about 12 of the last 27 years. So I'm somewhat used to that both that metric system and the English system we talked about. So that sort of morphed into a career in corporate HR. And from that, spent the lion's share of my HR and service businesses, first and foremost banking and finance, but I have been in other professional services businesses as well. Yeah. And over the course of that, I've managed HR, training, and talent management functions for organizations, both here and abroad. And my interest grew in leadership development. Naturally, leaders are the differentiator in organizations. Good leaders can propel them forward. Bad leaders can cripple organizations. And we've probably all seen it personally or witnessed having an inspiring, very wonderful leader and those that have done some reprehensible things that are examples of how not to manage others. So I was inspired by that, and my interest in leadership development grew, and I had the opportunity to develop and implement leadership training programs and development programs in a few different organizations. It's interesting, this thing about leadership. A lot of people don't get it, do they, Will? But I've always been, I'm a encourager of the John Maxwell philosophies, and John talks about the law of the lid, and an organization or even yourself as a leader will only ever be as effective as the lid that you place on your leadership. And I think we see that right throughout organizations, where you have organizations that don't have leaders of the 8s, the 9s, the 10s, and they may have leadership that sit around that ballpark, the average figure of about 5, is the organization will never exceed that average expectation. And the other thing that I see time and time again is that when you're a leader with a growth mindset, you're going to learn from everyone. You're going to learn from those great leaders because you're going to witness some really great achievements, and also potentially they're going to mentor you because they are a great leader. But you're also going to learn from the ones that aren't so great because you're going to be picking what it is that you shouldn't do as a leader. Is that something that you've experienced as well as you've gone through the HR and the leadership and people development place? No doubt. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also a huge fan of John Maxwell and read his books voraciously. And that's exactly right. You know, leadership is such an important differentiator in organizations. And leaders need to be humble enough to know that they don't know it all and have a growth or learning mindset and understand that they can learn from anyone at any time. Yeah. And that includes their subordinates, the people who are closest to the customer and the people who are the most important level in the organization, because leaders serve the people that serve the customer. And so I've worked with some wonderful leaders who really have taught me a lot and mentored me, executive colleagues who really inspired me in terms of demystifying leadership. You know, leadership is often seen as this black box or this mystical talent, and it's not. It's about treating people very well. It's about doing some of the routine things extremely well. You know, how well do we talk to people about performance? How regularly do we involve them in conversations? Do we get their performance appraisals done on time? Oftentimes it's doing the routine things or the ordinary things extraordinarily well that makes for a good leader. And also I'm a big proponent of servant leadership. Yeah. And I'm understanding that that's not mystical either. It's about treating people well and including them in the narrative of their work lives. And I have seen, frankly, I've counseled some executives who had to come into my office to talk them down off the ledge while they were speaking to senior executives because of the way they were treated very badly. I have seen executives or managers in periodic performance update meetings that were skewered or crucified for their performance, and that's not how we treat people. And I think that you learn some indelible lessons from that, and you understand how damaging bad leadership can be, and how inspiring good leadership can be. The little nuances, the little acts of kindness and decency are what make a difference to most people.
Yeah, and it's the daily disciplines of fulfilling your role and your attention as a leader. Now, you've written a couple of books. You've written The Leadership Core, Competencies for Successfully Leading Others. And I love the concept of a leader's core, because to me, I think the leader's core is built on character, and we expand from there. And that's a personal opinion. So I haven't read your books. I'm going to dive into that in a sec. But you've just released your second book. So share me a little bit about Fulfilled, which is the title of the book.
Yes, so Fulfilled is, strangely enough, it is actually an outcropping of a leadership program that I had implemented in one organization, and it was designed for aspiring leaders. And so we were aiming this at really sending the message of, before you can lead others, you need to learn how to lead yourself.
Wow, that's
successfully. Yep. And it's sort of, it really... It evolved into something that I never anticipated, which was a general book regarding how to lead a more fulfilling and prosperous life. So we talk about some of those fundamental concepts like emotional intelligence, being able to manage change, resiliency, self-development, and so forth. And I think it is a self-help book of sorts.
Yeah.
But I also think it is aimed at anyone who's looking to increase their personal effectiveness and also their contentment out of life, whether in the workplace or out. So it was an unusual turn in terms of direction of this leadership program to become a book that really was more about how to lead your life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's out now?
It is. It's out in ebook now. Major retailers worldwide, and it will be out in paperback in mid-April.
Excellent. So I'm going to share a quick little story about why I really align myself with that leadership core that you're talking about. I went to see a remedial massage therapist probably 5-6 years ago. I had a sore neck, and that was the reason. I couldn't move. It had been playing up for 2 or 3 months. And so I went to see this remedial massage, and he started working on my back, my lower back, and he started working on my legs, and then he started working on my calves. And I turned to him, I said, "It's my neck that's sore." And he didn't say much at that particular moment in time. And then he continued this overall thing, and then finally finished on my neck. And I said, "What was all that about?" I really expected you just to work on my neck. And he said, "Tony, everything comes from the core." He said, "If you've got weak core muscles, it radiates right throughout your whole body. And you may not know it, but the pain that you're feeling in your calves, the pain that you're feeling in your neck is all driven from the core." And so I'm driving home after being put through this massage and remedial massage can be quite painful, as we know. And I'm thinking about that now. And it's like leadership. Everything stems from the core. If you don't have a strong core, you're going to have pain right around the peripherals of your body. So, and that's when I started to really think, and your core is fundamentally your character. To me, I think it's your character, it's your calling, and it's your credibility. So to me, I think that's the core of a leader. So tell me about, you speak a lot about character. So tell me about your foundation of character in your leadership philosophy.
Yes, and it's discussed first in the book because I completely agree with you. A leader that lacks character or that has character flaws, frankly, nothing else matters after that. Whether we talk about functional expertise around recruiting or developing people, frankly, none of that matters if you have a leader who has weak character. And I describe several character traits or components that I think work for most people most of the time. Of course, there's no universal recipe to good leadership. But I talk about a few things, and the first is integrity.
Yeah.
If you have a leader that lies, cheats, or steals, gossips behind our backs about certain employees to others, and frankly, takes all the credit and doesn't shoulder any of the responsibility when things go wrong. These are cardinal sins of leadership. And if you can't be trusted about something as a leader, then you can't be trusted about anything. And this is why I hit integrity first. The other, which I think is, it's a double-edged sword with leadership, and that's humility. And there are some great books. One of the best books I've ever read on this subject is called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. Yeah. Which is it's a wonderful book. And, often the sense of confidence that we have in doing our job propels us forward as a leader. And you're the rock that other people lean on. You are the person others come to sometimes for answers. And the problem with that is that self-confidence morphs into arrogance sometimes, and a sense of narcissism. And we've probably all seen leaders, I have seen leaders and interacted with leaders where I had to say, I can't talk to you because I can't convince someone who's always right. There's no sense interacting because you don't take advice. And this is again, one of those understated qualities in leaders. It's great to have confidence, but there's a fundamental difference between sound self-confidence and a sense of arrogance, which endears you to no one. So I talk about humility quite a lot. I talk about accountability. I think accountability is a core part of character in holding yourself and others accountable for good performance and behavior. Responsibility is another. I think people sometimes confuse responsibility with accountability, but I'm talking about self-discipline. I'm talking about good decisioning. And then lastly, compassion, I think is another core part of leadership character that people don't think about, particularly new leaders that believe that leadership is about telling people what to do. And I've often said that, if you're going to get hands and feet moving in a particular direction, you need to capture hearts and minds. You can only do that if you take a compassionate approach. So that is fundamentally my recipe for leadership character.
It's and once again, I'll refer to John Maxwell. He always says hearts and minds. He says the heart comes first. And most people will say that sentence without necessarily thinking about it, but the heart is first for a very valid reason. We don't try and capture the mind first. We capture the heart. And I think that's incredibly important. And I think we're in a really good space at the moment because a lot of people are talking about things like compassion, vulnerability, curiosity, listening, empathy, and all of these, what I won't say the new traits, but there's a new focus on them in respect of leadership, especially in the business and the corporate world. And I think that's a really positive place to be. In your work with your clients, what are you seeing them adjust and shift in their leadership capacity or capabilities?
I think it is around some of those things that you mentioned. Certainly, we have learned over the last couple of years that as leaders, we need to be much more dialed into our own and others' emotions, because the last 2 years have been a trial globally for workers and leaders alike. And so leading in a more servant leadership capacity or with more heart, getting that balance between heart and head changed. You're right. No logical argument on earth will convince someone if it doesn't inspire them either. They're not going to go the extra mile if you're basing your argument on logic alone. So I think we've learned to increasingly focus on compassion and emotional intelligence. We talked about it. We've talked about it over the last 20 years, and it sounds like a neat phrase, but it was often maligned. That's about weak leadership. The servant leadership idea, clearly you don't care enough about performance in the bottom line if you're going to walk around hugging people all the time. That's not what servant leadership is about. And I think that this is one of the approaches, certainly, that has garnered more attention, is that we need to be understanding as leaders. The other is flexibility. There is much talk around the war for talent and the great resignation, so to speak. And this this is nothing more than a very employee-driven market right now. And it's true to say that those employers that are holding on to archaic concepts like, frankly, office-based work all the time, for example, or suit and tie culture. I remember one organization I was in, we spent more time debating giving people a jeans day or a casual day than I ever would have thought. You would have thought that the sky was falling before we gave them the opportunity to wear jeans. So I think it's common sense leadership is gaining traction, and a substance over form.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
My clients don't need to see me in a suit and tie every day. And in the banking industry, for example, that was always a must. And it's certainly true that you have to adapt to your audience, but you also have to reflect your audience as well. And I think a lot of these sorts of things are changing our values about what leaders should be focusing on, and of course, what the newer generations of workers want, which isn't about substance or form. It is about substance.
Yeah. And the way it's interesting you talk through some of those perceptions that some leaders have around leadership, emotional intelligence, all of those things, because it is a perception that is changing, but there are still some rusted on habits or traits of some leaders that fundamentally need to be chipped away, and they actually need to be chipped away from the inside, I believe. They don't, it's like that, what you were talking about. If you're not inspired by something, you're never going to change your opinion if it doesn't connect with you emotionally. And for a lot of those leaders, what it means is that they need to probably do some pretty deep self-reflection on the changes that they're witnessing and observing around them before it's actually going to really strike in deep. But I don't see emotional intelligence as anything that's soft, that's anything that's kumbaya. We're not sitting around a campfire singing hymns and lullabies on a team building thing. Emotional intelligence is a daily discipline in my aspects. It's about working with your team, understanding your team, building your rapport with your team and within yourself, so that you're ultimately getting better outcomes because everyone's more in alignment with where we're moving. You do a lot of work in the emotional intelligence space. So just share some of your thoughts and beliefs around how you work with leaders with emotional intelligence.
Yeah, and I think that is a fundamental challenge, because often what got leaders to the corner office or near to the corner office was an unbridled sense of confidence and decisiveness. And what happens with consistent success is you begin to believe your own press. It feeds this leviathan around ego. And so it doesn't matter necessarily what other people think. You don't need to respect them as much. This is what the ego is telling you. When, of course, we know in reality that's not true at all. And I think working with leaders to say, look, you need to increase your self-awareness. Oftentimes it is self-awareness.
Yeah.
It's self-denial about this. No, I don't have a problem. Well, perhaps your results around engagement, turnover, productivity, poor Glassdoor reviews, whatever it may be, is saying otherwise. And I think it's getting leaders to understand that you don't have to have all the answers. The best leaders, look to their teams and consult with them. And so it's increasing their internal self-awareness, their knowledge of themselves and where their strengths and weaknesses lie, and also their external self-awareness, which is their awareness of how they're perceived by others. Yeah. And some leaders, frankly, don't care. And many leaders are just unaware. And so I think this exercise around increasing internal and external self-awareness is important. And the other is about managing attitude and optimism. These are important aspects to emotional intelligence, and ensuring that leaders understand their prevailing attitudes. And you talked about a growth attitude, for instance, versus a static or nature versus nurture attitude. And this is written in a couple of wonderful books as well. So it's increasing their awareness of this and how their attitude affects the culture in their teams and the organization, and how crucial it is to manage these things. So emotional intelligence is so crucial to personal success and even more vital to leadership success. And again, I would pin down emotional self-awareness, self-control over your emotions, attitude and optimism are I think, fundamental aspects of emotional intelligence.
Yeah. It's while you were talking then, I was thinking about a leader that I work with, and she's a very much a D style in the DISC profile, direct, dominant, really focused on results. And we've had some wonderful conversations as her self-awareness has increased and improved, I guess would be a word that I'd use. But one of the things that we've really worked with is trying to get, so she's very focused on KPIs and results and targets, and that's what drives a D-style leader. We understand that. But in many ways, we've had to shift that slightly so that when she has a productive conversation with someone, or she has a win with an adaptation of style to be more effective with someone, she now sees that as a result when she sits back and self-reflects. So it's still the same driver. We've just sort of shifted what that looks like for her. And yeah, she still reverts back to style every now and again and sort of, but there's a real consciousness now that she will reflect on conversations and say to herself, how did I go? And it's just like moving the results, moving the targets. And I've had some, as I said, some fascinating conversations, and they will continue. So let's talk a little bit about personal fulfillment. We're 2 years into a global pandemic that has created uncertainty and anxiety and stress, and everyone doesn't know the direction. And when we seem to have a direction, it seems to shift and change. And there's been a lot of personal stress in relation to it. And the ones that, the words resilience get used quite a lot during this time. We've got to be resilient, and the people with resilience are going to burst this COVID bubble at some stage in the future. Tell me about the ways that you've seen people build resilience, and maybe not just in this time, but generally, and overcome some adversity that they've had within themselves.
Yeah, I think that it's been tested more the last couple of years than we've ever seen. And I think that there are some general themes or techniques around building resilience. One is to network. No man is an island, so to speak. And you do need to network. You need to ensure you have a support system. And that is looking out for people who can validate your feelings, people that are an empathetic shoulder to cry on when you need it, people that listen and can provide you wise counsel. And in turn, of course, you'll do the decent thing and do the same thing for them. Yeah. But building a network of people that, in addition to those things, they help you feel normal. That you are not going through this alone. You are not uniquely tortured in what's happening. Unfortunately, or fortunately, you have others experiencing similar things. And this is the whole idea with affiliation, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need to affiliate. And if you're not affiliating, you're going to struggle much more than you need to. So you don't want to find out after you're already in the midst of crisis that you need to build a network. Build that now. Have some good, reliable friends, confidants, work colleagues that you can go to when you're struggling. That will be a safe place to have a conversation. I think other means certainly are when we talk about resilience, learning how to deal with rejection and criticism. Now, that may be separate a little bit from the general challenges we're having. But there's a number of techniques that I describe in Fulfilled around dealing with criticism and rejection, and how to reframe those things. The reframing generally, right, is one way of building resilience. looking at adverse circumstances and saying, well, what is interesting or novel? What could be positive about this? People lose jobs. Well, of course it's horrible, but what opportunities could come out of this? What are the things that you are freed from when you've lost your job? What things can you now aspire to or do that you couldn't when you were shackled to the desk, so to speak? So reframing is important. Reflection, you talked a little bit about the importance of reflection. That's key because you spoke about Maxwell, and of course Maxwell says that if you don't reflect, right, you get the experience but not the benefit of the lesson ever. So we need to reflect on what happens, good and bad. The other is treating yourself well, both mentally and physically. And people need to remember routine, exercise, sleep, treating your body properly, and attending to your mental health has been incredibly important, whether that's through meditation or counseling. Whatever that you talked about, your run, I run. That's my best thinking time is when I run. But there are destructive ways in which people handle adversity. We know about addiction and abuse, substance abuse, and many other ways in which people erode their sense of resilience. So I think that's certainly part of it as well. So I would point to those things as important. Taking care of mind, taking care of body, networking, reframing, and reflecting are certainly all important. And remembering this too shall pass. Right? That we all get things out of perspective when we are in the midst of crisis. But how will it look a month down the road, a year down the road, when we're in the rearview mirror? We're trying to regain perspective, and this too shall pass. Right? As bad as it is, we'll get through it. If you haven't seen, there's a wonderful video called "The Last Lecture" by Randy Pausch.
Okay.
I won't give you the backstory because it's quite emotional, but Randy Pausch was a professor in the U.S., and he talked about how horrible sitting for his post-grad exams was. And his mother just turned to him and said, I know how you're feeling, honey. When your father was your age, he was fighting in World War II. And she was making light of the fact that it might sound like an awful thing right now, but if you put your exam trials in perspective, a lot of people have gone through a lot worse and lived. So I think that's important too. Resilience we could talk for quite a while on resilience, and I think it is such an understated and important quality in people and in employees. Their ability to be resilient and also to successfully manage themselves through change ought to be celebrated much more by leaders than it is today.
Yeah, a great point. Will, who's inspired you in your leadership journey?
Well, certainly there have been a couple of executives that I've worked with. One in the UK, while I was working in consultancy, that I learned a lot from. And a couple of executives I worked with in the financial services business in the US. I really gleaned a lot from them about how to manage the challenges, I think, of being both a functional head and an executive. And also, certainly, everyone teaches you about leadership and how to treat others. And I learned from two in particular I worked very closely with for about 7 years. And they really inspired me to build and deliver leadership training programs, and they were participants in it. They helped me deliver it as well, which was wonderful. I also learned from a couple of leaders, frankly, who were inspirational in all the wrong ways. I've been around leaders who I felt had brilliant minds in terms of their business acumen, but frankly, just weren't good with people and didn't value people. And I learned a lot from them and the fallout of having to manage through that about how not to lead as well. So you learn from both the good and bad.
Absolutely. How do you deal with this concept of failure? So tell me about your relationship that you have with failure.
Yeah, I think earlier in my career used to be scared of it, as if it was a swear word. You talked about KPIs and performance, and this concept of failing was taboo, right? It was the elephant in the room. It wasn't to be discussed. You were to avoid it at all costs. And of course, we would rather learn through success than failure.
Yeah.
But I think oftentimes the best learning lessons in life are when we fall short of the mark. It's the feedback that stings more. It's what we learn about ourselves when the going gets tough. There's a saying that smooth seas do not make for talented sailors. And I love that quote because I think that it's, having leaders manage in a maintenance mode doesn't tell us much about their character.
Yeah.
Seeing how they operate in crisis and in times of difficulty and what they learn about themselves is different. So I have a much more, let's say, friendly relationship with failure. I still would rather avoid it if I can. But there are valuable lessons to be learned. And we also need to remember that a fear of failure leads us to, it inhibits innovation.
Yeah.
It inhibits incremental growth. Failure is just one more step on the road to success. So if what you're doing is not trying to win the game, but trying to avoid losing, that's a very negative perspective to lead within. And I think it doesn't bring out creativity in people. And I have instilled and embraced that in my teams to tell them, it's okay to fail. What I want to know is that you gave it your best effort and that I didn't have a surprise. You told me if you were going through difficulty, you engaged me early enough so I could help if possible. But if not, we learn a lot through failure. And so using it as a learning lesson for the group is vitally important. Yeah. There's a book called Failosophy by Elizabeth Day, a UK writer, and she has a companion book about it that I really enjoyed. And it did continue to evolve my perspective on failure as well. So, it's not a swear word. It's something to be learned from as a valuable experience, even though we would prefer to learn through success. But we learn much less about ourselves through success, and often it leads to complacency.
Very much so. Tell me about your vision. So what's your personal vision for going forward? Well,
I think for myself, it's to continue to engage and challenge myself in the talent management arena and to continue to work with or in organizations that allow me to challenge myself there. I find the challenge of trying to manage the performance of, inspire, and retain talent deeply motivating, deeply inspiring. So my happiness is linked at work, at least, to my ability to do that and to continue to work in leadership development. Outside of work, I'm enjoying authorship as well, and my growing passion for spreading news around personal growth and fulfillment, as well as leadership in the workplace. And for me, it's just continuing to broaden my horizons, to grow and to be better in terms of how I can contribute to the communities in which I'm involved with. And that hasn't always been the case. There have been times I've been so career focused that balance between work and other aspects of my life wasn't great. And one of my big goals has been to strike that better balance and to be much more authentic in terms of how I work and how I lead. So those are the things that I'm continuing to work on.
Excellent. How can people connect with you?
Well, there is a website called willschirmerofficial.com that provides some more information on me. I am on LinkedIn as well. I am on Instagram under Will Schirmer Official, Twitter, Will Schirmer1, and I also have a Will Schirmer Official Facebook account as well. So I'm sort of all over social media and would love to hear from anyone who's interested more in personal growth and fulfillment and also leadership and talent management.
Excellent. And of course, we'll have all those links in the show notes. So thank you so much, Will, for your time this afternoon. Enjoy your upcoming weekend. And thank you so much for investing in Today's Leaders.
Thank you so much. I have really enjoyed the conversation.
And now, it's time for Tony's 2 cents.
William mentioned so many great tips during our conversation. I was really impressed with the depth of knowledge that came out in such a very short space of time. Now, one thing stood out for me. When we spoke about reflection, Will shared a Maxwell leadership theory that experience is only beneficial when it comes with insight and reflection. How true is that? How true is that? It's not just true. I think it's critical for your success. You see, experience is just one part of the equation. There are many people that will repeat experiences. Your experiences, your wins, your losses, your failures, your success deserve to have your best reflection and insight for you to get the most beneficial learning that you can. Some people just repeat years so that after 10 years in a role, they don't have 10 years experience. They just have 1 year repeated 10 times. And that's sad. And that's certainly not leveraging your potential. And it's certainly, if you want to be part of tomorrow's best leaders today, just repeating the same experience time and time again will not get you there. Now, if you haven't believed in reflection or if you haven't invested in it, ask yourself, how can you add it to your processes within your own leadership journey? And maybe if you have been doing it, why don't you share some of those successes with us here at the podcast? Share how reflection and experience with insight has helped shape your journey, whether it's a career journey or whether it's in business growth. A big thank you once again to William for coming on the podcast. And of course, his links are in the show notes. If you're looking to build better leadership skills, check out the Today's Leader website at todaysleader.com.au. We really are driving a leadership revolution to build tomorrow's best leaders today. Today's Leader is a collective, the mindset to make a difference, the ability to create an impact. Think and Grow Business hosts our Today's Leader Mastermind. Think and Grow Business, where we focus on personal, professional, and business growth. Book your free 30-minute discovery call right from the homepage at thinkandgrowbusiness.com.au. Don't forget, wherever you are standing stronger, braver, and wiser. Don't forget the golden rule. Don't be an arsehole. I'll see you all again next week. Bye for now.